Hi guys, G-Economics here. This is a feedback video for Year 11 for our lesson on the 1st of February. Last week you completed question 1 from this paper. A592 June 2010, the macro paper, question 1. And so today I'm just going to bring you a little feedback video which I want you to watch in the lesson tomorrow and amend your papers when I return them to you. In your papers you'll find I have used a number of abbreviations in the margins, and I just want to run through what they mean. SP, spelling mistakes, corrections 5 times each please. GR, grammatical mistakes, corrections 5 times each please. TV means too vague, not enough depth to your answer. EE, this is a good thing ladies and gentlemen, if you've got EE in the margin, this means effective evaluation, credit and award given for that. NAQ, not answering the question, rambling on, answering something which you have in your own mind but it's not answering the question. And finally, BOD, benefit of the doubt. So for example, some of you on question 1 where you're asked to identify the period of the fastest economic growth, you've circled one and then you've changed your mind, then you've changed your mind again, and after about 4 times there's marks all over the page, but I think you've more or less hinted at the one you want me to mark, so I've given you the benefit of the doubt. Okay. In general, I would say this question was much better done than the one you did previously in the previous week. Let's look at the things where we went wrong. So question 1A part 1, you're given the data in the form of a chart and you're asked to identify the period which in the paper says, and I do think that this is slightly confusing, it says the fastest economic growth. I think you should really read that as the highest, which year had the highest rate of economic growth. And I think if you read it as that, you'll get the correct answer fairly easily. Again, 1A part 2, it asks you to identify the slowest. Again, slightly confusing I think given the data that you're given. Again, read it as lowest and you'll not have a problem answering it. Question 1B. All you lazy bones out there who cannot be bothered to learn the definition of GDP, you need to commit it to memory. So all I'm saying here, ladies and gentlemen, is learn the definitions. So learn the definition of GDP, and then obviously when you know that, GDP per capita, simply GDP divided by the total population, that's an easy thing to come up with. Some of you then started to ramble on about what the disadvantages are of GDP per capita as a measure and as a tool of measuring standard of living. The question is not some sort of comment or evaluate question, so you just don't need to get into that. Don't waste your time on that. Nice to see you know it, but don't waste your time on it. Next one. Income and wealth. A lot of you on B, you're talking about GDP and mentioning in the same breath wealth. Well, GDP is measuring income, not wealth. And you need to get it clear in your own mind what the difference is between those two things. Wealth, of course, being a stock, whereas income is something that accumulates, and in the case of GDP, accumulating over the course of a year. Part C. You need really to be careful on the directive words. Pay attention to the directive words. And by that, you know that I mean, does the question start with explain, analyse, state and explain, to what extent, discuss, comment, evaluate, etc. Well, this one required you to discuss. And so you should have set your answer out in terms of what are the benefits and costs of economic growth. You should have been saying, on the one hand, here are all the benefits. And don't just bullet them. We need a little bit more than just bullet points, ladies and gentlemen, so you're being too brief. I know there wasn't much room to actually write a great answer here, so don't be afraid to use the additional paper in the script. The costs, on the other hand, here are all the costs of rapid economic growth. So lots of you pointing out very relevant things such as pollution, such as stress, such as people working very long hours, etc. These are all very, very good things to point out, but it requires a discussion. Many of you went for the, economic growth can cause inflation, which is a great point, AD curve shifting around the LRAS curve and so on, but don't just leave it at that, because there's more to it than that, isn't there? There's more to the cost of economic growth than that. And don't forget, at the end, you need to say, on balance, weighing up all of these benefits and costs, it would appear that either the costs outweigh the benefits or the benefits outweigh the costs. Finally, D, the 8-mark question. Quite an easy question, I thought, given the structure of it. So you're already sort of given 2 easy marks at the beginning. So you simply identify a policy. You must avoid simply stating one policy is monetary policy, one policy is fiscal policy, one policy is supply side policy. You get no credit for that. You must say, for example, fiscal policy, governments follow a budget deficit policy, or monetary policy, reduce the base rate of interest. And again, avoid the use of one-word answers. It doesn't take long to write a few words, so just be on the safe side and write a few words rather than leaving it all very brief. And yes, the final 2 sections, you then had to explain your policy, but what many of you didn't do, you didn't see that in the stem of the question, the directive word is discuss. And so you must, again, evaluate, effective evaluation. So some of you pointed out, well, reduce the base rate to stimulate growth. Why does it stimulate growth? Because if they're on variable rate mortgages, their mortgage repayment falls, so they have more disposable income. However, people may choose not to spend this additional money if, for example, they're worried about their job prospects, and they may save it, and so you won't get that fiscal stimulus into the economy of people spending that additional money. So you've got to be careful and make sure that you read the question and then discuss. And I think a final thing to say on this one would be, I think there was only one person, Joe, I believe, who included an appropriate diagram, or diagrams, in D part 2. So when you're doing your DIT, when you're improving, excuse me, when you're improving your work, what I want you to do today is to think of a diagram which would be appropriate and suitable for your first policy, and a diagram which would be appropriate and suitable for your second policy. Okay, remember, ladies and gentlemen, don't sit on the fence on these, you've got to discuss them. And we'll leave it at that, so bye for now.